This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to China Global Television Network. This is The World Today. I'm Beatrice Marshall in Nairobi. Here are your top stories. Russia denies Britain's accusation of a plot to install a pro-Moscow leader in the Ukraine. Cleanup and relief efforts pick up the pace following the Tonga tsunami. And the Saudi-led coalition denies targeting a prison in Yemen's Saada province. Let's begin in the Ukraine, where the situation in Ukraine, Moscow has denied British accusations that it is trying to install a pro-Russian leader in Kiev. Moscow says the UK's claims are disinformation, and it is another indication that NATO members are escalating tensions. On Saturday, Britain accused the Kremlin of considering a former Ukrainian lawmaker as a potential candidate to head a pro-Moscow leadership. It says Russian intelligence had talked to former Ukrainian politicians as part of plans for an invasion, but the British Foreign Ministry did not offer evidence to back these claims. Russia has repeatedly denied it had any intention to invade. Top US and Russian diplomats met on Friday in Geneva. The talks ended without a breakthrough, although they agreed to keep talking. The Russian and British defense ministers have reportedly agreed to meet. Political advisors from Russia, the Ukraine, France and Germany will reportedly hold talks next week in Paris. Well, Russia has slammed the US for publishing a list of what Moscow calls false information about its policy on Ukraine. The Russian Foreign Ministry called the sheet an overt provocation. The US State Department on Thursday published the list titled Fact versus Fiction, Russian Disinformation on the Ukraine. It came just a day before Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and US Secretary of State Antony Blinken met in Geneva. Russia said Washington has been seeking discussions after Moscow sent a draft treaty and agreement on security guarantees in December. The ministry also slammed the US and its allies for depicting Russia as an aggressor and a threat to international stability. Germany's Navy chief has resigned after criticism over his comments on Russian President Vladimir Putin and Crimea K. Achim Sternberg on Friday. On Friday said Putin deserves respect and that Kiev would not win back incorporated Crimea from Moscow. Sternberg later apologized for his remarks, which were criticized by German Defense Ministry and Ukrainian authorities. Meanwhile, Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba has condemned Germany for refusing to provide weapons to Kiev. The US, Britain and the Baltic states have agreed to send weapons to the Ukraine, including anti-tank and anti-aircraft missiles. Let's now turn to Tonga, where a massive cleanup effort continues after a devastating tsunami last week. The first relief flights from Australia and New Zealand have arrived at Tonga's international airport, which just reopened. Other governments also deploying ships and flights. Authorities say a 2G communication service is back on, although restoring full internet services is likely to take a month or more. The Pacific Island nation was hit by a tsunami following an undersea volcanic eruption last Saturday. More than 80% of the population has been affected. Owen Poland reports from New Zealand.
A high-ranking Tongan politician that I've spoken to here in Auckland says that Tonga's recovery from this disaster is going to be long-term. And once the water and emergency supplies have been delivered, the island nation is going to have to rebuild. And he says it's going to be a long road to recovery. In terms of the international relief effort, New Zealand already has 2 Navy vessels in Tonga, and a third ship is now on its way with more supplies, including water and milk powder and tarpaulins for shelter. Ships from the Royal Australian Navy and Britain's Royal Navy are also on their way, and they'll join a US vessel that's also now reached Tonga. So the international community is really pulling together to help out. So far, New Zealand has also sent 2 emergency flights with humanitarian aid, including food, water, first aid kits and other safety equipment. And a 3rd aircraft is now being prepared to leave within the next few days. Nevertheless, a United Nations coordinator who's on the ground in Tonga says that the resources that they have are not enough and that it's too soon to fully assess the extent of the damage to Tonga's economy.
Well, CGTN spoke to a couple who witnessed the terrifying impact of the huge underwater volcanic eruption last Saturday.
Yeah, Marion, she called me to come and pick her up. She just said that she's having difficulties breathing, and then she said that the sea is a bit, it's weird. So when I came, as soon as I left the house, we just seen that there was a big ash cloud, a white one, with the volcano. And then we just came to the graveyard. As soon as I seen the ocean, I've never seen the ocean like that in my life. The wave was already started to come on the road, and I seen just more and more of the oceans ready to come in. So I was a bit scared to pick up my wife. So I went down close to Wakalai and I went to scream for her. And then I had no response. And then my kids were crying, "Oh, we're not leaving, Dad. We need Mum to come with us." So I just asked them just to get in the car and we left. But through the grace of the Lord, she walked out of Wakalai and then we just waited for her and then we took off. So we took off to Kanukpolu, and that's where the first bang, we heard the volcano exploded. As soon as we got to Kanukpolu, the people were just looking and they were just smiling, and I just said to them, the ocean's already it's already coming. It's hake, the tahi's hake in Wakaloa. And my wife is screaming in English,
"Tsunami, everyone, tsunami, get out, get out." Yeah, so yeah, I think, well, people were just living their daily life, really. They didn't even know that the sea was coming, like they didn't know there's a tsunami.
And now to Yemen. The Saudi-led coalition has denied targeting a prison in Saada province this week. It said the facility hit on Friday was not restricted from airstrikes. The attacks reportedly killed more than 70 people. The coalition said the deaths would be investigated. The coalition has been fighting the Houthi group since 2015. The coalition has intensified airstrikes on what it says are Houthi military targets after the group on Monday carried out an unprecedented assault on coalition member, the United Arab Emirates, on Monday. And we'll have more updates on this story on Africa Live coming up shortly. The Chinese mainland has reported 90 new locally transmitted cases of COVID-19. Of the 19 infections, 9 were reported in the capital, Beijing. With just 12 days to go before the Beijing Winter Olympics officially opens, entry into the capital has been tightened. Travelers to the capital must show a negative COVID-19 test taken within 48 hours before entry, and they must be tested again within 72 hours upon arrival. The port city of Tianjin has logged 5 new cases. The southern province of Guangdong has reported 3. In central China, the province of Henan is closer to containing its outbreak, reporting just 1 new case in Anyang. 1 infection was detected in southwestern Yunnan province. And turning now to the coronavirus pandemic in the United States, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says almost all new infections in the country are of the Omicron variant. Data also suggests the number of Omicron cases has peaked in the U.S.'s eastern states, while new cases in the West Coast and the South continue to rise. Nick Harper reports now from Washington.
Well, some encouraging news when you look at the national picture. We are beginning to see cases drop right across the United States, currently at around 720,000 new cases each day compared to more than 800,000 just over a week ago. Here in the east of the country, that data suggesting that the Omicron variant has peaked, but in the west and in the south we're still continuing to see cases rise and also deaths, more than 2,000 a day in total, which is still a very high number. Hospitals saying saying that they are struggling. Many ICU wards across the country saying that they are full. Well, the Food and Drug Administration is doing more to try and combat this. They're expanding the use of remdesivir, an antiviral drug that's been used up until now to treat the sickest patients, those who have already been hospitalised. But the FDA is now expanding it so that at-risk patients who have not yet been hospitalised will also be able to use remdesivir. Other changes that we're seeing from the CDC, they're changing some of the language that they're using. They will be pivoting away from the use of fully vaccinated. They're saying that that term has now become confusing as more and more people are getting booster shots. Here's the CDC Director, Rochelle Walensky, explaining it.
And what we really are working to do is pivot the language to make sure that everybody is as up to date with their COVID-19 vaccines as they personally should be based on when they got their last vaccine. That means if you recently got your second dose, you're not eligible for a booster, you're up to date. If you are eligible for a booster and you haven't gotten it, you're not up to date, and you need to get your booster in order to be up to date.
Another change from Saturday, any travellers, essential or non-essential, entering the US by either land or sea will have to show that they are fully vaccinated. From November, we already had non-essential travellers having to show that proof, but now that's being expanded to essential travellers. The US government says that's all about trying to keep people here in the US safer. But there is a fear that the anti-COVID drugs, that the virus may be able to mutate and get around that new medicine. In particular, the drugs that have been produced by Merck and Pfizer that have been approved for use. We could see the virus mutate, but at this stage the companies are saying that in their trials they didn't see any drug resistance being built up. They don't think that that is something that people should be worrying about, but still scientists are putting that alert out there. And yet, even though we've got all of these new medicines, the vaccines, there is still a continuing threat, sometimes from people in the United States. There has been, over the course of the last few days, an incident in Virginia where a mother went to a school board meeting and threatened to bring guns to school if officials didn't stop making her children wear masks while in the classroom. This woman threatening to bring every single gun loaded and ready. She later had to apologise, clarifying that when she said guns, she didn't mean firearms per se, but rather just resources in general. Even so, she was arrested and charged, and she could spend up to a year in jail for threatening to bring firearms to school property. Nick Harper, CGTN, Washington.
And that is it on this edition of The World Today. I'll be back shortly with more news on Africa Live. Thank you for watching.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Burkina Faso government denies that the army has seized power. The Arab League meets in Cairo over Houthi rebel attacks in Abu Dhabi. And Ghana blast survivors recall ordeal following Thursday's deadly explosion that killed 13 people. Welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. Also coming up on the program. In sports, FIFA holds Africa's final round draw for the 2022 World Cup qualifiers. And we begin with a developing story out of Burkina Faso. Gunfire was reported Sunday morning in several military barracks in the capital, Ouagadougou. The government has confirmed the reports of gunfire. It denied, however, reports circulating on social media of a military takeover. In a statement by the government spokesperson, authorities called for calm. This comes just after hundreds of protesters marched through the capital on Saturday. Demonstrators barricaded streets and threw rocks as they called for the resignation of President Marc Christian Kabore. Security forces used tear gas in an effort to disperse the demonstrators. Protesters also voiced their opposition to the latest round of sanctions imposed on Mali by ECOWAS.
We are protesting against the sanctions of ECOWAS against Mali. We have to denounce the unfair sanctions by ECOWAS and stage an international protest for that.
President Roch Kabore must leave. We are all agreeing about that. We believe that the governance is catastrophic on all levels, and mainly in the security domain.
Well, let's get more on this developing story. I'm joined from Ouagadougou by Lucien Kambo-Malba, a journalist based in Burkina Faso. Lucien, there are reports of gunfire in military barracks over there in Burkina Faso. What do we know so far? What are you hearing?
Hello everybody. Today since 4 a.m. we have been hearing gunfires in Ouagadougou, especially in Babasi camp and Camp Samgulela Mitana. According to the government, the president is not arrested, he is still free. And there are some militaries who are unhappy about something, and they are sorting those camps. And right now what I can say is that people are still on their work, things are going. But the Minister of the Army just had a talk where we invited everybody to continue life because our military they will be addressing the senior minister, the senior officers of the army, and things will be well soon. That's what they said. And right now, before the call, I was seeing that the data is turned off. Then there is no data in Burkina Faso right now. And I called some friends. That's what they noticed. They do not also have data for connection right now.
All right, Lucien Kambo-Malba joining us there from Burkina Faso. Thank you. Well, Guinea's junta on Saturday set up an 80-member council to act as a parliament during the country's transition to elections. This follows a coup in September that ousted President Alpha Condé. The body, known as the National Transitional Council, will be led by a prominent civil society activist and election expert, Dansa Kuruma. It will be tasked with agreeing on the date for the next elections. Condé's overthrow was condemned by Guinea's neighbors and international partners. It led to its suspension from the African Union and the Regional Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS. And now to Yemen. The Saudi-led coalition has denied targeting a prison in Saada province this week. It said the facility hit on Friday was not restricted from airstrikes. The attacks reportedly killed more than 70 people. The coalition said the deaths would be investigated. The coalition has been fighting the Houthi group since 2015. The coalition has intensified airstrikes on what it says are Houthi military targets after the group on Monday carried out an unprecedented assault on coalition member, the United Arab Emirates, on Monday. while the Arab League is holding an emergency meeting to discuss a recent attack by Houthi rebels in Yemen on the UAE. The meeting will be held at the request of the UAE and other Arab countries. Ambassador Ahmed Al-Bakr, the Kuwaiti delegate to the Cairo-based league, has said. Al-Bakr, whose country is the current chair of the Pan-Arab body, said the meeting will discuss this week's terrorist Houthi attack on Abu Dhabi. Let's discuss this further now with Adel Mahroui. He's joining us from Cairo. Adel, what's the latest from Cairo on this?
The emergency meeting of the Arab League has started about an hour ago. It is attended by the permanent delegates in Cairo, those who represent all of the 22 Arab nations, the member states in the Pan-Arab Organization. Throughout their statements, taking one by one to represent each country, so far it appears that we have unanimous rejection to the Houthi attack against the UAE, the terrorist attack as they all describe it. And there is a stance so far that appears to be also unanimous, a strong stance to support security and stability in the UAE and highlight or display that any instability or any attacks against the UAE affects the entire national security of the Arab world. These statements came from the countries like Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Lebanon, and more. So it seems that by the end of the meeting, there's going to be a unanimous resolution from all 22 Arab states to condemn this attack from the Houthis against the UAE terrorist attack and using allegedly drones inside the territories of the United Arab Emirates, maybe for the first time. And therefore, the resolution will probably be taking a lot of steps in terms of condemning and showing solidarity with the UAE, but we're not expecting any further steps or actions to be taken from the Arab members.
All right, Adel Mahroui joining us there from Cairo. Thank you. Well, let's now head to Ghana, where satellite images released on Saturday showed the scale of destruction in Apiate village, western Ghana, where a truck carrying explosives to a gold mine detonated, killing at least 13 people Thursday. It was not immediately clear what caused the accident, but police say a motorcycle crashed into the truck, then caught fire. A government statement suggests a roadside power transformer could have also played a role in the explosion. The truck was owned by a Spanish company called Maxam. According to police, it was transporting explosives to the Chirano gold mine run by Toronto-based Kinross Gold Corporation. Meanwhile, residents of Apiate village are still in shock following that deadly blast on Thursday in the country's southwestern mining region. A motorbike rammed into a truck which eventually burst into flames in the incident. At least 13 people were killed and nearly 200 others were injured. CGTN's Mohammed Abubakar has the details.
Nancy Nyarko says she was preparing porridge at her roadside stall when she heard a loud noise nearby. She recalls seeing a motorbike colliding with a large truck and eventually bursting into flames.
The truck stopped and the driver got out and started waving. The fire continued to blaze. I saw the driver pushing the gate open. And when he got out, he ran to the shop and told the people to get out. I could not hear him from where I was, but I could see him gesturing for people to leave, and so I decided to leave.
The truck is said to be owned by a Spanish company called Maxam. It contained 10 tons of explosives that were to be used to blast rocks at the Chirano gold mine. The blast has claimed the lives of about 13 people, and at least 200 more have been injured.
I climbed on top of a heap of sand to get a better view of the fire, where I spoke with the driver as he tried to call the fire service. He kept saying something was about to happen. We called and called, but by the time they came, the worst had already happened.
It is said that the truck was on fire for 45 minutes before the blast. Authorities, however, have not responded to those claims. Residents are now worried about the enforcement of safety regulations governing the transportation of dangerous materials, as well as the speed and effectiveness of the authorities' response to such emergencies. Mohammed Abubakar, CGTN.
To South Africa now, where a new study in the Western Cape has shown that the Omicron-driven fourth wave caused fewer deaths than previous ones. According to the study, this is due to high rates of past infections as well as the reduced risk of severe disease and death owing to the variant itself. More than 5,000 adult COVID-19 patients were observed during 1 month of the fourth wave during the research. CGTN's Travis Andrews has more.
Now that South Africa is slowly exiting the Omicron-driven COVID-19 fourth wave, more is being discovered about the variant. In the Western Cape, a new study has shown that Omicron caused fewer deaths and hospitalizations than previous variants in earlier infection waves, and this is due to a number of facts.
Essentially, there are three main reasons that we could see different disease outcomes. The first is that the kind of people being infected with COVID might be different. So perhaps they're younger, perhaps they're people with fewer comorbidities. So when we do the comparison, we need to take that into account. The second thing is that we know that over time, immunity has been increasing for two reasons. One, because we now have a vaccine program, and so many people are vaccinated. And the second is because we've had these three very severe previous waves, and so many people have been infected and have immunity.
Researchers also found out that the Omicron variant itself is less deadly, even though it is better able to penetrate protection offered by vaccination. Omicron was associated with hospitalization or death in 8% of the cases examined in this study, compared to 16% in the previous waves.
Omicron indeed causes less severe disease or is less virulent, that the virus itself is not as bad. And we know that there are quite a few laboratory studies now that suggest that Omicron replicates more easily in the upper airways and doesn't replicate nearly as easily in lung tissue, and so is less likely to cause severe COVID pneumonia, which has been the predominant feature of the previous waves.
Even with lockdown strategies in place, the study also found that 38% of those infected in the fourth wave were fully vaccinated but at a much lower risk of dying or being hospitalized. Health professionals here say the best way to protect against Omicron is to get vaccinated, and that along with natural infection will prevent people from ending up with severe disease, as seen in the first few waves. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. A new report says at least 1.5 million children in Eastern and Southern Africa lack a treatment for malnutrition. At least 1.5 million children are reportedly lacking life-saving treatment for severe malnutrition in Eastern and Southern Africa. According to the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, over $200 million are needed this year to provide emergency nutritional support to the neediest countries. CGTN's Daniel Arapmoy reports.
The Eastern and Southern Africa region currently faces increased food insecurity and rising cases of malnutrition. According to UNICEF, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, combined with climate shocks and ongoing conflict, is pushing children and families to the brink.
These 1.5 million children are in just 6 countries in Eastern and Southern Africa. And those countries have faced multiple threats, including drought, prolonged drought, floods, desert locusts, conflict, and of course, on top of that, the impacts of the pandemic.
Consistent shortfalls in funding have hampered UNICEF's humanitarian response.
These 1.5 million children urgently need support in terms of funds for the programs, funds for the supplies, which UNICEF is ready on the ground to help deliver through the governments and through the partners that we have on the ground.
According to UNICEF, families across the region have had to reduce the quality and quantity of the food they eat to survive. The UN Children's Agency is seeking $255 million to scale up its emergency response in Eastern and Southern Africa. For now, the situation in the region remains dire, and it's feared that any disruption to an already stretched humanitarian operation could worsen what is already a long-running nutrition crisis. Daniel Arap Moi, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
The Western Cape High Court has reserved judgment in the legal battle between some groups of the indigenous Khoi and San peoples of Southern Africa and the developers of the African headquarters of the multinational company Amazon. The indigenous peoples claim that the development will desecrate their centuries-old tribal land, while the developers say that Amazon and other tenants will bring much-needed jobs and investment to Cape Town. The court heard arguments from both sides in the past few days. Renee Delcam has more.
The urgent court application was brought by the Goring Haikona Khoi Traditional Council and the Observatory Civic Association to try and stop construction on the River Club development, where tech giant Amazon is set to build its African headquarters.
This is one of the most significant pieces of land from a heritage perspective in the entire country. And yet the decision is to build 18 high-rise buildings on this. Now that can't possibly be right in our view, and we want to stop that construction continuing. Inflicting harm on this sacred landscape comes on top of 500 years of dispossession. So these are deep wounds both psychologically and culturally.
Amazon's choosing to put up its headquarters on a site that's highly contested, that's a sacred floodplain, and that Khoi people who oppose the development believe it's a source of deep injustice, and it's repeating the injustice of colonial history.
The Liesbeek Leisure Properties Trust, the City of Cape Town, the Western Cape Provincial Government and the Western Cape First Nations Collective have all opposed the application to stop the development.
I would like to hear a positive response towards the development. This is a footprint in Southern Africa. It is going to be a beacon from where we can be able to connect with the international community at large. I believe it is a tremendous economic injection into the Western Cape and work opportunities for many of our people.
This development will realize in the order of $300 million worth of development, and there are a range of other substantive benefits, including over 5,800 direct employment opportunities and some 19,000 indirect employment opportunities.
Deputy Judge President Patricia Goliath said it was hard to attach a monetary value to the indigenous people's culture and traditions. During the three-day proceedings, she repeatedly reminded the court that the developers had gone ahead with construction at their own risk, full knowing that the project was highly contested. The judge said she would prioritize her ruling on this matter, as she understood that it was urgent. Renee Delcam, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
And staying in South Africa, rhinos injured in poaching incidents now have a higher chance of survival thanks to a pioneering new medical treatment. A team of health professionals in the country are now using medicine usually administered to horses to give regenerative medical treatment for the injured rhinos. Here's CGTN's Travis Andrews with more details.
It is an all-too-common sight in many South African game reserves. Another rhino found dead due to a poaching incident. What is not common, though, is the sight of those that have survived such a poaching attack, often left with bad injuries and some even orphaned. But a team of health professionals have turned to regenerative medicine along with biotechnology products to assist them.
One of the first products we've used extensively are the hyaluronic acid products, and these essentially are products that we inject into joints directly or systemically, and that provides increased lubrication and has an anti-inflammatory effect in joints in our equine patients. And because horses and rhinos are so alike physiologically and to a certain degree anatomically, what we do on a horse, we can very easily mimic on a rhino.
The treatment project comes as a result of a partnership between the Rhino Pride Foundation and Novida Biotechnology to use a medical regime normally used on horses. One of the products being used is called Regenesis, which allows the faster healing of the animals.
And so we're starting to use this product also in rhinos to try and speed up healing. Because of the wounds that they suffer, we're looking at providing just that extra bit of support that we can get them through these acute stages after suffering traumatic, foreign body penetrations through projectiles. Often we do this kind of treatment in conjunction with removing the projectile, and then we do the treatment at the same time.
For the moment, the treatments are only being provided to a select number of rhinos because it remains a relatively early concept, which is expensive as well. However, with the population continuing to face pressure due to poaching, these remain important steps to take to save the species. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
And we still have more news for you here on the program. To stay with us.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Let's take a brief look at your business news. The US-led sanctions imposed on Zimbabwe 2 decades ago have had a far-reaching and probably unintended impact on the Zimbabwean economy. The move came when then-President Robert Mugabe launched a violent election crackdown. The sanctions are strangling the country's access to the international banking system, limiting much-needed funds for economic recovery.
The American law known as the Zimbabwe Democracy and Economic Recovery Act, ZIDERA, forbids global lenders from working with Zimbabwe. This is one of the biggest wounds suffered by the Zimbabwean economy. Intended to apply to the elite, the sanctions imposed travel bans and a freeze on assets held by top Zimbabwean officials. But it had a ripple effect.
These sanctions have let us down and continue to suppress our business, and the wish is to see us suffer, but God will not forsake us.
We used to employ over 350 employees here. We are now down to less than 50 employees. Just that tells you what sanctions are. We used to train refrigeration mechanics, and all the refrigeration mechanics that we've trained, which are much more than 300, have all left the country and are working all elsewhere outside the country.
For the sanctions to be lifted, Zimbabwe is required to hold better elections and respect human rights, but also adhere to the South African court ruling to pay some $9 billion to white farmers whose properties were seized during Mugabe's land reforms 2 decades ago. With little action from the government and sustained pressure on the citizens, some are speaking up.
We don't want conditions to be given to the government or the people of Zimbabwe to say do this so that we'll remove sanctions. Actually, especially when it's being done by the so-called people who claim to be masters of democracy and human rights, yet they fail to uphold the things that they preach.
Zimbabwe's entire GDP is only $16.7 billion. Harare has made initial payouts of $53 million, a tiny fraction of the amount demanded. The result is that Zimbabwe's meager supplies of US dollars at home continue to create a risk for entrepreneurs to seek access to greenbacks abroad via private banks. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Nigeria's National Economic Council has recommended a substantial increase in the price of petrol in the country. If the recommendation is approved by President Muhammadu Buhari, the price of petrol, which is currently sold at about 40 cents per litre, will jump to about $1 per litre effective next month. But as our correspondent Tessie Makende reports, some experts are warning that the petrol hike will be disastrous for the majority in the country.
The price of petrol has been a contentious issue in Nigeria for decades, and it looks set to double in the next few weeks. The Nigerian government has been subsidizing fuel since the 1970s, when the country's refineries became largely moribund and they had to rely on expensive imports. It spent over $2 billion in subsidies between January and October last year alone. Authorities say eliminating the subsidies will ensure fair competition in the market pricing for petrol. Governors in the country in May last year recommended the same increase, but it was rejected after widespread public opposition. But the National Economic Council, which is headed by the nation's vice president, has advised that the price increase starts in February. The NEC claims the move will save the government hundreds of millions of dollars each month and help boost public finances. But experts say there are fears the increase in petrol price could be disastrous for the country's poorest people. More than 80 million Nigerians live below $1.90 a day. The government has pledged to fix the defunct refineries to help lower the cost of petrol. Nigeria is the largest oil-producing nation in Africa, yet it imports its petroleum products from other countries with better infrastructure. A fuel subsidy has been promised to help lessen the blow for some of those who can least afford the price rise. Tassim Akende, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Tunisia says it will not grant amnesty to traffickers and smugglers, even as it extended its tax amnesty program to mid this year. The move is part of the government's strategy to enhance the formalization of the shadow economy and the informal sector and boost state revenues. CGTN's Adnan Chauchi has more from Tunis.
Tunisia's finance minister announced that the country's citizens must provide proof that the sources of their income are not dubious to benefit from the cash amnesty. Authorities will not grant amnesty to smugglers and traffickers, and the taxation office and banks have been instructed to reject any illicit cash deposit. However, critics believe that the requirements might be difficult to verify.
Our answer to critics is that no exceptions will be made. Cash that comes from money laundering, terrorism, or any illegal activity will not benefit from the cash amnesty measure. We will not tolerate any illicit financial resources.
The Tunisian Institute of Chartered Accountants has welcomed the government initiative, but some experts believe that the conditions of the amnesty measure could deter many people from declaring their hidden cash.
People who will benefit from the amnesty and who haven't declared resources will become part of the tax system. The handicap is that the state will know them and could seize their assets or prosecute them in future. Even if the law protects beneficiaries, they may think that there is no real guarantee.
Financial analysts have said that the 2022 cash amnesty is part of the government's strategy to enhance the formalization of the shadow economy in the informal sector. Accordingly, this measure will affect economic growth positively.
This cash amnesty is necessary. It is welcomed by several economic operators. It will allow the government to formalize the shadow economy and increase the state's financial resources. However, authorities need to put in place a strict control system to guarantee the success of this operation.
Experts urge the government to establish genuine coordination with the banks in order to report any suspicious transactions.
The Tunisian finance minister has defended the cash amnesty project, which she described as purely fiscal. Analysts say that this measure will successfully reduce and formalize the shadow economy, which represents 40 to 50% of the national economy. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
And coming up in your sports news. FIFA holds Africa's final round draw for the 2022 World Cup qualifiers.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference. How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
And we begin with some African football, where African contenders to represent the continent at next year's FIFA World Cup in Qatar now know who their upcoming opponents are after the draw for the final round of the African qualifiers was held on Saturday. The draw, held in Douala, Cameroon, was conducted by CAF Competitions Director Samson Adamu, assisted by CAF and FIFA legends El Hadji Diop and Emmanuel Adebayo. Egypt will face Senegal, Cameroon will take on Algeria, while Ghana have been paired with Nigeria. DR Congo will face Morocco, while Mali draw Tunisia. The ties will be played across 2 legs between March the 23rd and the 29th.
These are the 10 top teams in Africa that will compete at the playoffs. These qualifying matches will be very big games, and I hope that the best team in each match can qualify. The qualification for the World Cup is an objective for all these teams, and I think they will do everything they can to get their ticket to Qatar.
Yeah, I think it was a good draw, and the draw reflects the top nations in Africa, and any of those nations that qualifies for FIFA World Cup in Qatar will make us proud. A lot of talent in Africa, and the aim of all of us in leadership in Africa is to have an African nation in the final of the FIFA World Cup and ultimately to win and become champions of the world.
Liverpool superstars Mo Salah and Sadio Mane are set to come up against each other after Egypt versus Senegal popped up during the draw of the final CAF World Cup qualifiers. This comes as both teams struggle to impose themselves at the Cameroon 2021 AFCON. Egyptian coach Carlo Queiroz is under pressure to take his team to Qatar, as CGTN's Adel Mahroui tells us.
Conducted in Cameroon, the pots brought out the enticing clash between Egypt and Senegal. It means one of Liverpool's teammates and African football superstars, Mohamed Salah or Sadio Mane, will be watching the biggest football showpiece from home.
فأكيد إن أنت تواجه منتخب بحجم منتخب السنغال هيكون عليك صعب.
For Egypt, facing a team like Senegal is hard. Coach Carlos Queiroz always say he focuses on qualifying for the World Cup. The question is, how will he face this challenge? He can no longer take risks or make tactical experiments. He needs to take all the time and get all the resources from the Egyptian Football Association to win. Senegal is very strong. They have the best player in Africa, and so do we. So it will come to the rest of the team, which they may have an advantage at.
Qualifying to Qatar is a deal breaker for Queiroz. His contract with the Egyptian Football Association will automatically terminate if he doesn't make it. Perhaps that could have made him lose sight of winning an 8th African title for Egypt at the Cameroon 2021 AFCON. This has cost him his popular support in a country that adores its success and heritage as record African champions.
I am not optimistic. Qualifying for the World Cup is usually very difficult. We had a very strong team in 2010 and 2014, but they could not reach it. This team has good players, but they are not good at playing together. The AFCON performance is disappointing. There are many weak points, and the players don't seem to have the enthusiasm to win the AFCON or reach the World Cup. Senegal, on the other hand, appears stronger.
It's not too late for Queiroz to drum up support from Egyptian fanatical fans. He has taken the last 2 national teams he coached to the previous 3 editions of the FIFA World Cup. All he needs to do is deliver strong results in AFCON to make them believe.
Standing on two different branches of the AFCON knockout tree, Egypt and Senegal may have an early face-off if they make it all the way to the final. While the odds for that is maybe low, one thing for sure is that both coaches will be looking much closer now to the opponent's team, starting with this week's round of 16. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
The Africa Cup of Nations in Cameroon resumes today, with Burkina Faso taking on Gabon in the first round of 16 clash before Tunisia and Nigeria battle it out later on Sunday night. Nigeria, who are Group D winners, are the only team with a 100% record at the tournament so far. Tunisia have had a different route to the knockouts, just sneaking through as one of the 4 best third-placed teams. The Carthage Eagles are aware of Nigeria's threat and form in the competition so far, but are confident of turning up for tonight's game.
We trust in our players. We trust them despite the bad conditions that all of you know very well. All of our players are determined to win. We know the value of the Nigerian team. We know that they were the best team in the group stage, but at the same time, Tunisia still has its reputation, ambitions and goals.
Further afield, Manchester United interim manager Ralph Rangnick looks set to give Tunisian wonder kid Hannibal Mejbri a chance to play in the senior team once he returns to England. The Tunisian is currently representing his nation at the ongoing Africa Cup of Nations in Cameroon. CGTN's Adnan Chauchi brings us more.
Hannibal Mejbri won the award as Africa's best young talent, following an exceptional performance with his country Tunisia in the FIFA Arab Cup in Qatar last month.
I am very happy with the award. I thank all Tunisian fans who voted for me. It's amazing when fans vote for their favorite player. This award is not just for me, it's for my country, Tunisia.
The Tunisian Football Federation announced that Hannibal tested positive, then cured of COVID-19 in the same week. The Manchester United midfielder and young talent says he's proud to join the national squad in Cameroon.
We are among the best teams in Africa. We'll give our best and play match by match to prove it, to go as far as possible in this competition.
Tunisian football administrators believe that the 18-year-old Hannibal could become one of the best players in Europe and the world.
Playing AFCON, just like he did in the Arab Cup, will allow Hannibal to be part of the first squad of Manchester United. He's a brilliant footballer. His professional attitude and determination will make him one of the best players in the world.
Hannibal Mejbri has joined the national squad for the AFCON tournament before heading back to Manchester United for the last few months of this season. The Tunisian footballer declared that he now dreams of winning with the Eagles of Carthage several continental and international tournaments. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
And some athletics news now. And Samuel Chebole and Joyce Chepkemoi are the new Kenyan cross-country champions after beating loaded fields, the self-styled City of Champions Eldoret. The 2022 Athletics Kenya National Cross-Country Championships were a dress rehearsal for the memorial Agnes Tirop World Cross-Country Tour to be held in the same city on the 12th of February. CGTN's Mohamed Abubakar has more.
Samuel Chebole, a former World Cross Junior bronze medalist, was the toast of the day when Kenya held its national cross-country championship. On his senior debut, Chebole trumped the field in the 10-kilometer senior men's race to win the signature event of the day at a meet that attracted hundreds of runners.
The competition is good. I am happy that I have emerged victorious in my first try at the senior race. So it is really good and I am happy.
Kennedy Kiprop took second place with Vincent Kiprotich rounding off the podium. In the corresponding senior women's race, Joyce Chepkemoi stunned a star-studded field including two-time Olympic champion Faith Chepngetich and two-time world under 23,000 meters steeplechase champion Silifinches Paul for the victory.
I thank God for winning. I wasn't expecting victory, and I thank God for giving me the strength until I finished first.
Faith Cherono and Sandra Chebet settled for silver and bronze. Mingling with the thousands of fans who thronged the Lobo Village course in Eldoret were retired Kenyan distance running icons and top athletics officials.
Honestly, this is an honor for God granting us such an opportunity to be able to come over here and be able to take part in the national championships of the 2022. And I really also want to thank my team for working, tirelessly, and also, showing the effort, and self-confidence.
The organization has been very well, and this is the international standard we are expecting as we prepare for the continental cross country, which is the world tour that will be held on the 12th. So we are happy. This is a stage now, so that if there are any changes that we need to make, then we can do it now. When the other internationals come here, we are able to stage a better event that we have had today.
Kenya is now ready to host the best international cross-country runners on the 12th of February when the same venue hosts the Memorial Agnes Tirop Cross-Country Tour meeting. The event has been named after the women's 10-kilometer world record holder who was brutally murdered last October. Mohammed Abubakar, CGTN.
And we'll leave it there on this edition of Africa Live. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen, and do follow us on our digital media platforms. And thank you for watching. I'm Beatrice Marshall in Nairobi. From me and the team here on Africa Live, bye-bye and stay safe.